Our very first session is an author's journey to New York Times 100 Notable Books on 2020 by Dr. Harini Nagendra, author, director, research center at Azim Premji University. And of course, she will be in conversation with Shinie Antony, author, curator, Bangalore Literature Festival. In fact, I was really, really excited to start off the BBLF today with this very first session because Shinie is an absolutely wonderful person, if you know Shinie, and a very dear friend. I've known her from my radio days, Shinie. That's exactly where I met you. And of course, I've hosted a couple of editions of the Bangalore Literature Festival, all because of Shinie. So I want you to give her a big round of applause. She's going to start off the BBLF today. And as you know, she's a writer, editor, and columnist. Her story, A Dog's Death, won the Commonwealth Short Story Asia Prize in 2002. Her novel, Can't and Lilette, will be out this year. Big round of applause. I mean, we've been waiting for your book, Shinie, for a really long time. And the one thing I absolutely love about Shinie is her casual, friendly, and ever-smiling, yet professional demeanor that is actually her most striking characteristic. So I want to hand it over to Shinie Antony, ladies and gentlemen, for our very first session of the BBLF 2023.
Thank you, Melody and Manav, and thank you, BBLF. There are so many twinklings to Harini Nagendra's intellect and creativity. One really doesn't know which part to start with. She's faculty at Azim Premji University. She loves forests, flowers, lakes. That's why she's called Harini. Harini means deer or doe, and also yellow jasmine, and also Vayavo green. And one of her books, like they just told you, was on the New York Times list of best books last year. So let's start with that. How do we get there, Harini? How do we get to that list? But seriously, how much did your life change after that? And did the expression on your face change permanently after that?
So yes, it's been quite a journey, I have to say. And you know, the fiction writing, as someone who wrote non-fiction for many years, I mean, that's still my love, you know, forests and writing about green and blue and nature. But I have to say, fiction reaches so many more people. And I realize that now. I mean, a reader from Canada sent me fudge, a care package, and another friend who's an ecologist and a very well-known ecologist in India said, why don't I get that for ecology books? And I said, I don't get that for my ecology books. So it's a very different world. You reach people much more differently. And what I'm trying to think now as putting on my ecologist hat is, how can I work more ecology into my crime fiction? I guess
how did it happen? Like
how did it happen? Yeah. So I wrote the books. So I don't know how this works. I have a wonderful US publisher, Pegasus, and they gave it to New York Times, and which did a review. But it turns out, I think that the person there liked the books, and she did my second book also as a New York Times book review. So it comes as a surprise. You know, you don't know that your book is being considered, or publishers send the books to the New York Times selectors, but they get thousands of books. So how it came, how it happened, I have no idea. So, but yes, it does change things a lot, you know, because it's in some sense that and a number of book awards that it was nominated for have opened the door to many, many, many things. So that has been very nice.
So my next question was going to be about what you just started saying. Mm-hmm. Straddling fiction and non-fiction. Very few people are able to create in both genres, side by side, you know, that too. So you have your latest book in non-fiction is Shades of Blue, Connecting the Drops, and you have your second in the series of the Bangalore Detectives Club, Murder Under a Red Moon. You know, so you're an eco-warrior, you're an eco-writer, you write about Earth, and you also tell stories. So how are you able to do? Is there like something like by day you're an environmental writer, and by night suddenly on a full moon night, you just become like this fiction writer.
I shape shift or whatever. No, not quite. What I do, so I always wrote fiction. So when I was very young, I read and I wrote. And my poor father was my unwilling or willing, I don't know, reader. So I used to write books for him when I was 8, 10, and I used to write for these, children's competitions, Shankars International, etc. And then that was always fiction, always fiction. So all the way till my postdoc at Indiana University, I was writing short stories for literary magazines. And then somewhere work sort of took over and I started the scientific writing work and popular writing went by the side. So people always ask me, how did you pick up popular writing? But it's the other way around for me. The first love was always fiction writing.
So it's the other way around. So I'm very happy to hear that because, I am a fiction writer, but do you think that being a fiction writer early on and having that kind of encouragement from having listeners within the family who were supportive and encouraging those stories, did that also impact your writing when it came to non-fiction?
I don't know about that. See, I've always been an avid reader from a family of avid readers. So I think for me, the impetus that I don't want to just write scientific publications that only other academics read. So that was always very clear that I wanted to reach the public. But what I didn't have is the fear of writing. I can sit down and write. I always think that I'm going to be struck dead. I mean, not, but maybe my writing will be struck dead and I'll get, so I won't be able to write after that. But so far I've been fine. What I do find is these two styles are very different. So if I write non-fiction, it's linear, it's crisp, it's not all over the place. It has to follow a storyline. I have to use simple words. And so when I write non-fiction, I can't write fiction after that. So you were asking how I write, right? So if I'm doing them parallelly, as I often am, because there's at least a research paper or an op-ed or something to be done, I have to write fiction very early in the day. So the way I do it is if I'm writing the books, and now I'm contracted to do one a year. So it's that intense period of 3 months where Saturday, Sunday, half a day is to the fiction. And twice a week, early in the morning 2 hours or late night 2 hours. It's some time where it's completely separated from my work day. I have to do that. I can write fiction and then non-fiction very easily. I can't write non-fiction and fiction after that. It just doesn't work.
I think it's unfair to ask you, but which gives you a bigger high?
Difficult to say, difficult to say.
I think you want to say fiction.
Yes and no. Fiction is also very scary because when I start, it's very scary because I feel like I'm constructing a superstructure out of tissue and it can collapse, whereas I'm very confident with writing my non-fiction. So it's both are exhilarating, but the non-fiction is much less scary. I'm on very safe ground there, and the fiction is always the first few weeks are. I really have to struggle to get the confidence to power through, and then it's fine.
So a young girl called Kaveri in your novel. She's living in an India of the 1920s. She swims in a sari. There are local references like the village of Buttermilk. And she's 19, she's newly married. So how did she come to you? Whom is she based on? Is she you?
She is not me. She's some amalgamation, I'd say, of various aunts, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, and people that we knew. She really came to me. Someone said recently when I was doing this in a book, talking about her in Champaka, that you had a visitation. I probably had a visitation because in 2007, I was looking at archival documents of Bangalore for my day job, the ecology job. And she just appeared in my head and said, write a book about me. So it took me a while to figure out how to get that book in place. It took 13 years to get the first fiction book done. But she came as a full-formed character. She's very real to me. So is her husband. The rest of the characters came later. But she and her husband were there, and she's still a very strong voice in my head.
So did she come to you named Kaveri, or did you name her Kaveri?
She came to me named Bhagirathi, and her husband was Lakshmikant, and I have no idea how long the way Kaveri came. But also, so my mother's mother, my maternal grandmother, was Tungabai, and her whole family was named. There were a lot of sisters. There was Kaveri, Tunga, all of these rivers. And so I guess I picked it up. And I was thinking of Tunga for a while, and then I didn't want to name her after my grandmother directly because that gets dangerous when you're doing things to her. So
yeah, people will start reading it and thinking, okay, that's me then.
Yeah,
if that's Tunga, then this is me.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Would you read a little bit from
Sure.
that?
Yes. So in the first book, Kaveri gets married, moves to Bangalore, and her husband is always extraordinarily supportive of her. But she has a very difficult relationship with her mother-in-law because she's independent. She likes to study. She likes mathematics. And her mother-in-law isn't used to this. So she thinks like, she says things like, women, if women study too much, their brains go soft and their home is in the kitchen. In book 2, I figured out I had to do something to see. So in book 1, I just got the mother-in-law very conveniently out of the house halfway through. But in book 2, she has to resolve this relationship. One way or the other, they have to figure out how to get along with each other or how to stay away from each other. So this is the part, early part where she's like, her mother-in-law actually calls her in to investigate her cousin Shanti's problem because they're having embezzlement in the factory. Bhargavi still sounded annoyed that she had missed the end of their conversation. She started to tell Kaveri stories of their childhood. Shanti's mother, her cousin's mother, had been sickly, and so Shanti had spent long hours in their home when she was a child with Bhargavi looking after her. No wonder she's so fond of her, Kaveri thought. Bhargavi had never spoken to her so freely or shared personal anecdotes about her life before. But Kaveri was not yet comfortable enough with Bhargavi to ask her personal questions. Her mother-in-law was very unlike her. She annoyed Kaveri with her insistence that she should subscribe to the social customs that confined women to the home. Kaveri could vividly recall Bhargavi's displeasure when she refused to follow the abhorrent practices of caste segregation dictated by society. But over time, Kaveri was also beginning to come to understand Bhargavi as a person. After she lost her husband, she had become very dependent on her son and feared losing him to his new bride. She wasn't a bad person at heart. She was generous with her time and attention, doing charity work in the local temple on weekends, acting as an advisor to her younger relatives, dropping everything a few months back to go and help her injured sister. Soon after she moved into the house, Kaveri had been feeling especially dejected after one of her mother-in-law's barbed comments. "Leave her be, Kaveri," Ramu had said, holding her close. She had been brought up conservatively and has been trained to think a certain way. She will come around. And indeed, in recent times, Kaveri felt they were getting to understand each other better. She wanted to develop a closer relationship with her mother-in-law, instead of forever being at loggerheads with her. So she sat quietly in the car, enjoying this unusual chance to get to know a different, softer side of this usually abrasive woman. If helping Shanti was what it took to bridge the gap between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, then she would do everything she could to fight out the truth behind the embezzlement. If indeed there had been an embezzlement. And as we soon find out, it's a murder.
It's good that you ended it on a suspense note. You want them to pick up to know what happened next.
Exactly.
So your non-fiction new book, it's co-written. It's co-written, and it's Shades of Blue, Connecting the Drops. Like I was telling you, such a beautiful, poetic title. One feels drunk on water, actually. How did the researching for that go?
So Seema and I, the colleague I wrote this with, we've been working together for 11 years now, and we work on a lot of research together. We've written Cities and Canopies, our previous book. We've written Shades of Blue. We've written So Many Leaves, which is a children's book together. And water was the next thing. So actually Penguin approached us saying, you've done a book on trees, can you do one on water? They said rivers in India, cities. We wanted to do water. The thing is, we work very well together because we complement each other a lot, I think. And so if I do the ecology, she does the water as explorers, or if she does the water as microbiology, I will go and do the water as mythical monsters. So we're doing a really three-dimensional view through water in Indian cities, from the monsters and the myths to the ecology and the cryptozoology, and then the water warriors and stories of equity and justice, and the whole gamut. So it's really very, so the research is absolute fun. I mean, I think that's the thing. I pick books that are fun.
Did you travel all over India?
No, we wanted to. So the book is 2 years later than we thought it would be because COVID. And so we really landed up doing a lot, drawing on our own memories of cities that we've traveled to, and then working on secondary material. But yeah, we would have loved to travel. So now our plan is force the book to travel.
I think maybe you should do a book tour along those water bodies.
The water bodies.
Yeah.
But many of so 4 or 5 of the cities we cover are actually cities where we have our own research ongoing. So that way it wasn't as bad. But we would have loved to go to the Lakshadweep. We have a friend who works there, so we took a lot from him. So things like that.
Would you
Yes.
read a bit from that?
I'd love to. So this is on Udaipur, city of lakes, and will that become a dust bowl? So Scroll recently had a section on an excerpt from it, and I'll read from there. So I had gone to Udaipur just before COVID actually, and was so struck by the city of the lakes. And then when we started researching it, we learned about how the lakes were created by the kings, and how the city is so dependent on its lakes, which are fragile not because just of climate change and urbanization, but because the Aravalis are also being mined. The destruction of the Aravali hill ranges around Udaipur also threatens the city despite being less recognized. The Aravalis act as a geographic barrier to the Thar Desert and arrest its spread eastwards into the Udaipur plateau. They also act as a catchment area that feeds waters from the rain into the rivers and lakes of Udaipur. Until the early 20th century, the Aravalis were, and I quote, well clothed with forest trees and jungle affording shelter to tigers, bears, panthers, and the scenery is wild and picturesque. But this, the report on the administration of Mewar Strait for the years 1940, 41, and 42, says that even then, in 1944, now Udaipur is surrounded by hills bare of vegetation. Thousands of tons of silt have been deposited in these lakes. There could be no doubt that in course of time, these lakes would be silted up completely. More recently, an even more dangerous problem confronts the city, the loss of the Aravalis themselves. In a Supreme Court order, the judges observed that 31 hills and hillocks of the Aravalis had been completely destroyed by mining. Soil from these denuded hilltops flows down in the monsoons, silting up the lakes of Udaipur. Then you have the industrial and sewage effluents that flow into the lake, increasing nitrogen and phosphorus and stimulating the growth of vegetation. Without the Aravalis, there's a risk that monsoon rains themselves will decrease and the rivers that feed the lakes of Udaipur will run dry. Then, an ancient city that flaunted its beauty in paintings and music, and a world destination for celebrity weddings. The grandeur of Udaipur is now a pale shadow of its path. The question for Udaipur today really is, can it do tourism right? Or is it just a matter of time before unsustainable growth turns its landscape, once renowned for its lakes and natural beauty, into a dust bowl surrounded by denuded mountains?
I think both the fiction and the non-fiction that you read, the conflict has enemies who start with M. There's mining and there's mother-in-law, soft enemies maybe. My next question is actually a little technical. When you write both fiction and non-fiction, how do you find the response, the initial response when you're reaching out to publishers, later on from your readers, from book reviewers, and how people, the general people, see you as a non-fiction writer? Do they think you're more erudite and academic, and then when you write fiction, maybe they think you're more gypsy-like or something?
That I haven't heard, so maybe that's what they think, but no one's told me. No, I don't know exactly. Good question. The response from maybe because I started with my nonfiction and I started with things I worked on. So the first book was Nature in the City, Bengaluru, which is something I worked on. It was easy for me to get that first in because I know it is often difficult. I don't have an agent in Bangalore, so in India. So first it was that, and then the Cities and Canopies was easy again because it was based on our work, and then Penguin asked for the third book. So it's been good. The fiction was harder, and my agent is also an old school friend, Priya Daraswamy. So she lives in New York. So I think I was fortunate because I was struggling with the book. I was 3/4 the way with the Bangalore Detectives Club, and I changed the plot 3 times. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. And you normally will not get an agent who looks at 3/4 of a book, but Priya's an old school friend, loves Bangalore, and helped me brainstorm and figure out the points where I needed to take it ahead. But then after that, it's been great. It's very interesting because I think some literary reviewers say these are soft, these are historical mysteries, but they're definitely not. A lot of historical mysteries are grim, and I like cheerful murder mysteries, which is always that strange genre that you wonder how it came up. But they're definitely very cheerful. They tackle issues like poverty and discrimination and caste and gender, but in a very, very light way, right? So I see that reviewers sometimes, some reviewers like New York Times has been very good, but some reviewers say this is not noir enough or this is not dark enough for me. But readers seem to like it. I'm writing what I like, and the response from readers has been very, very, very generous. So I'm very happy. Yeah. from actually 11-year-olds to 90-year-olds, people are reading it. So.
Reading it. Yeah, it's actually, yeah, it's an age, there's no age barrier to the book. Should I be opening? Yeah. All right, so Harini is all yours. Shall I give you my?
Hi, my question is regarding your, do you think you could just move? My question is regarding your fiction book, and this is with your reference to your first book. While the story starts with an amateur sleuth, there's a very nice subtext of women empowerment. So is that intentional in your book? And just share a bit about how did you straddle the two? There is a crime series and there's women empowerment. I think cheers to that.
Thank you. Yes, no, that is very, very intentional. And this comes out, I would say, of a lot of conversations at home with mother and aunts about various kinds of strong, women in our families. I think so the first scene of her swimming in a sari is inspired by my husband's aunt, who passed away recently at 96, but swam in a sari in the Madras Club. And so there are all these strong women. All of us have strong women in our lives. And I was very inspired by that. But also the archives, Bangalore history of 1920s and 30s. Women were fighting for suffrage. There was D. Sakama, who was a coffee entrepreneur. There was Kalyanama, who had a women's magazine in the 1920s. So I wanted to weave all of this again. So when Kaveri came in, she was feminist to the core, and that's just a character. So I really wanted to weave that in, and so the murder mysteries for me are a way to show two things. One is Bangalore of the 1920s, which was green, and the word cosmopolitan is often overused, but it was cosmopolitan. It was embracing of diversity. It was pluralistic. It was kind and compassionate. A lot of things which are changing about the city now. And it had a lot of strong women fighting for gender feminist rights. So there's those two things I want to show in the book. And that actually continues in book 2 and 3. It actually ramps up a bit.
Hello, ma'am. I'm a very big fan of you because growing up, I have read Agatha Christie, and I love cozy mysteries, which you were talking about. That I don't like it dark. I love it when it's cozy. So I love that. So I wanted to ask you regarding how you moved about getting towards the ending, because your ending, I won't spoil it, but it was very out of the box, something. I didn't get the clue, and the way you moved about tackling the social culture and social evils, and the ending you managed to collaborate both of them. So what were your initial ideas and how did you go about that?
So the trick I learned, and this took me 13 years to learn, is first you write. So I can't plot. I'm a very bad plotter. I just have to jump in and the characters take the story where they go. And then they take me to what to me is an obvious conclusion of the first murder. And then this I learned as I went along, because I saw a webinar where someone spoke about this. Then you look at that and say, okay, who's the most non-obvious person? And then you go back and think, what if that person did it? Sometimes it's not possible. And then you go back and find a third person. So you actually change. So I write it first, and then a lot of things change while I reconnect the dots. Or somewhere 3/4 the way, I start thinking, okay, I'm taking it in one direction, but how do I take it in a non-obvious direction?
Hi, Harini. I have a right to ask you questions. Nobody is asking here. You're a writer on climate, ecology, and now fiction. Amitav Ghosh, in his book, Derangement, had said that we don't write enough climate fiction. And if you want to convert people from being aware to being action-oriented, you need to have good fiction. Okay, so how can you tell us how to do it?
I think he's absolutely right. In fact, so at some point, whenever I have the mythical free time that doesn't exist, I have a climate fiction idea in mind. But we really need so much more of this. And in fact, a research project I'm just starting is on climate fiction, trying to see how do people come up with these ideas and how can we engage people who are not understanding. who live their lives looking at ecology and being moved by nature but not appreciating the dangers that we're in. So that's, I think, a fabulous question, Benedict, and it would really be good, I think, to seed more, I think not just climate fiction, but now I'm more and more thinking Netflix and streaming platforms and all of those places, we need to start doing much more of climate fiction. So anyone who wants to talk to me, come by. We want to start a course, in fact, so on teaching climate science to people who want to do, all kinds of fiction, videos, documentaries, streaming platforms, what have you. So that's I think that's really in the direction I'm interested in heading, because I think one person can only write so much, but if you can teach the science to people who want to do much more creative stuff, then that's fantastic.
So, ma'am, I have this, you are a researcher, you write research, of course you do your fiction. So my question to you is, what is your writer's discipline that allows you to straddle, borrowing from what Shinie said earlier, straddling the two worlds of research and creative writing? What's your writer's discipline? I'm curious to know, aspiring writer, well, never know will I make it or not, but I just want to know from you. So how do you manage writing? What is your technique? Do you jot down ideas as they come to you? Do you go back to them in fiction, and then you have research, which is altogether, different space in writing? So how do you manage that?
My theory is the more crunched you are for time, the more you value your time. Because as I have the day job, I have my other writing, I have an elderly mother, teenage daughter, so there's lots of always moving pieces at home. And then I think, so when I set my time, and so if I'm writing, and I write the first draft of the book always in 2 months, whether it's fiction or non-fiction. So I know I have, let's say, 3 hours on weekends, so which I can get, Saturday, Sunday, and then 2 hours, twice more in the week. And I keep that flexible because I think I have a day and meetings take over the day. Something happens. But when I have those 2 hours, that's all I have. So I start with something like Sudoku because it kind of cleans my mind. It's a little creative, but not too much, or a crossword or something. And within 15 minutes, I know I have to start, and that's all I have. That's really all I have. If I don't get... So deadlines work, time crunch works, and it's sit in the chair, and that's it. That's all the time you have, so...
So I think feeling mortal helps, Yes. And going back to the previous question, there are a lot of these detective books and whodunits where, they would come and give you the main villain or the culprit as someone you never expected. But then it doesn't flow authentically. Because you feel as a reader, you feel cheated. Yeah, it's contrived. So congratulations so much, Harini, for giving us villains whom we can believe in, that they did do that, whatever bad thing that they were supposed to have done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.